to Senior Living Marketing Perspectives. I'm Debbie Howard, co-founder of Senior Living Smart, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Jeff Gronemyer, who's the Director of Census Development in China for Meridian. So welcome, Jeff.
Hi, good to see you.
It's good to see you as well. It's good to see anybody. So,
Right, yeah, absolutely.
I just thought it would be, a timely opportunity to talk to somebody, one of the few people probably in our industry that has international perspective around the COVID, pandemic impact to the industry. So I thought, this would be great. Let's get Jeff on a call because in some regards, because you oversee the sales efforts for Meridian in China, you may be a couple months ahead of where we are in terms of understanding the impact to the way we interact with prospects, to how to kind of reimagine some of the ways that we interact and nurture prospects, and even how to kind of tailor the sales training a little bit differently to make those adjustments. So, I'd love to get just kind of an overview from you. I guess a great place to start is, how are your communities in China doing? What is some of the key impact areas that you've seen, and what are the adjustments that you have made and are continuing to make as we all try to figure out this new normal?
Right. Those are all great questions. And I guess to give some initial perspective, in China, we completely shut down the buildings. So some small differences. We did not, take any new patients, new residents into any facility or community. We do have some skilled nursing as well as part of our service packages. So that was a slight bit of difference. We did still take deposits, 23 buildings. Over the 60-day lockdown, we're able to get 75 deposits. So we still had some movement. Statistically, we didn't see a significant drop-off in inquiries, although we saw a huge change in what people were calling us about. People were not calling us so much to inquire about, can I move in, but what can I do to keep my mom and dad safe? Yeah. So initially, we really shifted our marketing and sales message to being, here are things to do to keep your elders safe at home. And of course, there in China, there was no movement at all. So as restrictive as it feels here in the United States, certainly we couldn't visit anybody. You couldn't leave your home to visit anybody at all. So we sent recipes. We helped our seniors find local delivery for produce and other food items that we could get to them as quickly as we could. And we also asked and tried to, if it was possible for us, to do some of those deliveries ourselves, since we had a little bit of ability to operate within that healthcare parameter. So that's kind of the landscape that's maybe just a little bit different than what we found here. We just opened our buildings for move-ins in the last couple of weeks, and full move-ins. So, we're able to move people in. We do quarantine for 14 days currently. So we have, model rooms that are set up, and, the family can move in there. Protocols for, how we want to disinfect and clean any items that are being brought into the community was one of the first things that we really looked at, making sure we had a strong protocol for. Because as you can imagine, we don't know where anything's been or who's interacted with it. You get a moving company and other helpers, and suddenly there's a huge chance that contamination or virus can make its way in. So putting those kinds of protocols in place was really a joint operational and sales effort to think about what happens in a move-in, how many touch points were going to occur. And we sent out in the marketing materials a letter and some information that basically said, here's what moving in is going to look like going forward. And truly, I don't know that that's going to change, until, like we talk here, until there's a vaccination and some understanding of whether or not you can catch, the COVID, virus again, even after having it the first time. We'll probably keep those things in place for a long time in terms of the basics. What we're working on now, of course, is what should the building look like, and what should the connective actions of the salespeople look like, given the new landscape and the new environment and sense of well-being and fear that our prospects are bringing to us when they call to inquire.
Sure. So I think that's so interesting that you made the decision to basically, if I'm understanding you correctly, people are not bringing in their own furnishings, that you have decided to make that investment. Was that part of the model anyway? Was part of the culture maybe different in China in that you were providing furnishings and people weren't as kind of concerned about having their own things? Because I'm just wondering, are the folks in China just more compliant to go with something like that? I mean, if you told my mom, she wasn't going to sleep in her bed and she wasn't going to have her chair and all of her stuff. So can you tell me a little bit about, the differences maybe in culture, or maybe there are no differences in culture, and whether you think that's going to work here? Is Meridian in the States going to have those same kinds of guidelines? And are there any personal belongings besides clothing, or does the clothing get washed, to your point, based on not really knowing touch points and who's come in contact with some of those things?
Sure. And I'll clarify, they can still bring personal belongings, but to your point, an apartment in China is typically not bare. There is closeting and what we would consider to be dressers or vanities that are included in the construction of the building. The bed frames and the mattresses are also there and available. We have always offered to have furnishings available to families depending on their need. Maybe they just needed new things. Just like here in the States, sometimes it's a chance to buy some new stuff and make the move a little more exciting. Mostly it's personal pictures, clothes, and things along those lines. And, that 14-day quarantine period, part of that, not just the person, is for those belongings as well, so that we can make sure that they're there. On the second part of that, it's very true. There's not as much attachment to belongings per se, the way we understand it, I think, in the United States. A lot of that has to do with the fact that the living space is significantly smaller. You just don't have as many unique possessions. I'm not moving people in out of, 6 and 7 bedroom homes in that regard. So while the internal physical space isn't as varied as we have here, what is interesting is they're very concerned about airflow. There's a lot of emphasis put on, the feng shui aspects of things. So which way windows face. Our south-facing apartments sell much faster than the ones that don't face the other way. So those subtle cultural differences are there. To your point, I think we do have an easier time with the personal belonging aspect. And we do incorporate some of that into the buildings as well. If you tour many of the communities that we operate in China, we have items throughout the building that are period specific to their young adult years, their childhood years. We may consider some of those to be, antique representations, but traditional items that they're comfortable seeing are utilized throughout the building to create a sense of home. But, we definitely don't have the same pushback in China that we do, in the United States with moving, a 4 or 3 bedroom home down into an apartment sized building. In many cases, our apartments can be as large as, the apartment the person was coming from.
Okay. Oh, interesting. So you were able to get 75 deposits in a very lockdown, probably more restrictive than we've experienced here. So how did you kind of, instruct your sales team, or how did you make those adjustments to maybe interact differently, but still be able to get through all the way to closing?
Right. We're really focusing hard on the relationship aspect. And it was, I think, maybe a little bit easier. As you know, here in the United States, we are always talking about the balance between building a personal relationship and what is the sales process. Traditionally defined as finding a referral or gaining an inquiry, making presentations, doing tours, and then ultimately getting to a close and overcoming objections along the way. It's always hard to overlay both of those things and say build a relationship, yet there's the pressure of making a move in. Because we couldn't move anybody in, there was no pressure for
Right.
I need to close today. In fact, had we not gotten any deposits, I don't know that anybody would have been overly shocked or necessarily concerned that it hadn't happened given the state of the land. So we really were able in our training to talk a great deal about what does a relationship really mean. And a great example that I used, and I think it works well for the United States, is how much do we really know about culturally or lifestyle what our prospects grew up with? And I used an example, from America. I'm like, do you know who Jimmy Durante is? And most people look at you and go, yeah, I have no idea. My kids, 25 through age 19, couldn't tell you who Jimmy Durante was if it meant saving my life. But if you sit down with, a senior and you start talking about things like James Cagney or Jimmy Durante or remembering, the films of John Wayne, you're connecting with parts of their past life that really go into relationship building. And so we just focused on that in China. What was important? What did you do for hobbies? What was it like coming out of World War II and, the cultural changes? And they're very proud to talk about, the transformation of China over the last 70 years. And so history became a big part. Sending out, instead of a sales tip on how to overcome objections, sending out a weekly sales tip on some period piece of history that ranged from 1960 through 1976, really kind of the wheelhouse of an 80-year-old's younger life, so that they had items that they could talk about. And what was amazing is how much more people open up when you begin the conversation with something that is reminiscent of who they were and who they still see themselves as, that 20, 30, 40-year-old individual. So we really got a chance to bore in on that aspect of the process for us, and hopefully it'll continue to pay dividends as we move back into sort of a more traditional look at what we expect in terms of sales success.
That's so interesting. So I'm kind of hearing a couple of things there. Number one is that the sales people didn't have the pressure to get the advance, right? So they're not, so they're interacting differently. The prospect probably never felt safer because you got nothing to sell them. So when you call, it's not that you're calling to get them to do something or agree to something or attend something they have absolutely no interest in. And, and the third thing is everybody just has more time to connect and have conversations.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the one thing that comes as a benefit from, the restrictive environment that we live in is that people are actually seeking that connection, that conversation even more so. And we already know that there's many seniors in a database that are happy to have us call them on the phone and talk. And for them, that might be the most value we can ever give them. They may never move in. They just love that phone call. But to your point, there wasn't anything else to do. Stay at home, watch TV. You weren't even supposed to go out in your garden. So you were really inside of the confines of your living space. Interaction with the outside world, an ability to share what was going on in another place, to hear a voice that you could rely on that wasn't just the same repetitive. How many people do we talk to every day? And when that's taken away from you, those holes need to be filled. So you're exactly right. People had not just the time, but also the willingness to create those connections and participate. And, I'm hopeful that we were able to deepen relationships with, everybody that we spoke with and the people in our databases. We reached out to see how they were doing and follow up on their overall wellness, that'll continue to carry through, even though, the initial period is a rush back out to see everything. When we opened up in China, they had the same problems. Suddenly tourist attractions were flooded with more people than they had ever had. So it'll be a little bit of a wave, a flood of getting back to normalcy, but then those relationships will kick back in. And, David Smith says it all the time. We talk about advances and what you should do, and we plan for them, and we have a whole, he has a whole process and with the Sherpa component that really helps you along the way. But I think the underlying component of it is that when you just engage in the activities that we try to teach in that process, the advance kind of happens. You
Yeah.
don't really have to, you don't really have to force it or make it or pull it like you do if you're selling accounting software. If I continue to be a valuable relationship to you, you continue to advance, much like, dating or anything else. When you
Hmm.
make a new friend, the friendship starts off and it's relatively new, but if the two people keep adding value to one another's lives, it just naturally keeps advancing. It advances to going to each other's houses for dinner and play dates with the
Hmm.
kids, introducing eventually spouses, and all those advances happen almost organically when you really focus on, am I connecting on a relationship and an emotional level?
Yeah, I agree. And did you kind of experiment at all with any new technologies or new kinds of strategies and tactics? I'm just thinking about, the use of video chat, any of those types of things, virtual events or creative follow-up that may have been somewhat different.
Yeah, we certainly did. We're a little bit lucky in China that the adoption of some technology is a little easier. There's
Hmm.
one thing you notice immediately is that, everybody's a lot more adept and uses their phone. As an example, almost nobody has a debit card in China. Everything is paid
Hmm.
for by showing, taking a picture of a QR code with your phone and automatically transferring out. So sharing via technology is very comfortable, but we did start to focus on it and use it as a way to add a layer, because again, all of a sudden the ability to see somebody had gone away. Where we're used to talking to people, and we knew that if we could put our faces and a live connection in front of people, that would be another, way of deepening that personal relationship. So we really worked hard on what's a 30-second message that you can send out in a text.
Hmm.
The technology of WeChat and other that they have over there is very good at allowing that. And
Hmm.
so making sure that people were, utilizing multiple ways of getting a hold of folks. Interestingly, we don't have as much ability to do mail over there. The mail system is not
Okay.
like it here. So the handwritten note and some of that has to happen a little differently. So it was great for us to be able to use, video attached to a chat message or video attached to an email message, in addition to supplement, that agreed upon next step of a call and a time to talk more about, what they may want to learn about in depth. We certainly did that. We got way more aggressive on, what we pushed out to the digital channels, not
Hmm.
to say come and live with us, but to say we're here if you need a resource for help or information, or you just want to know a different person's perspective on it. Again, because we couldn't really sell anymore. Just why would you want to talk to me at this point in time? So, ideas for how to hold group exercises where elders could all just log into a public go-to meeting or WeChat group
Yep.
and share exercises. And it didn't matter if 9 people showed up or 109 people showed up. We had one person in a building doing chair exercises, and people could, log in and do that with our prospects. Just, those kinds of creative ideas, whatever we could think up, we threw out there because there really
Hmm.
felt like there was no way you could go wrong trying to communicate with people in a positive way.
So did you find certain channels were more effective than others? And, just looking forward, does that inform, what your strategy may be even as things open up?
Yeah, our paper channel had always been one of the strongest in China. That aspect of their communication structure is much stronger, I think, than, the newspaper channel is here, or paper channels are here in the United States. So we lost a little bit there, obviously, because of the difficulties in printing and getting out a physical
Yeah.
document. We certainly saw some increase in, the various digital channels that are available to us there, social media, what we would consider social media networks. And I think it also really pushed our learning of our organic growth, because we obviously were not able to spend more money on, purchased SEO or anything along those lines. So our intention and the way we looked at things really had to be becoming more expert at what was organically going to bring results. Now, prior to this, I don't think that we really spent a lot of time in a data analysis way looking at where leads came from. We had a lot of channels, and we had the money to put in there, and we were getting a lot of leads. And because of the infancy of the industry there, we were still in the, if I get a lot of leads, I'm really glad. We hadn't
Right.
moved to the a lot of leads doesn't mean a lot of move-ins phase quite yet. So
Hmm.
this kind of advanced that for us as well. The idea that, we don't necessarily need to have as many leads to get to get the move-ins we want. In fact, the selling process that we're going to move forward with now is really just focused on the middle. If I look at how many leads I got in February and March of 2019, or March and April and June of 2019, I'm right about that same number now. And where I'm off is I'm just not doing enough with them. So we're really going to focus on being better with the people that are talking to us, and not quite as focused on, just throwing everything we can at the channel. But certainly digital for us was a huge win, and the organic
Hmm.
component hopefully is something that our whole industry learns to get better at through this, because I don't think anybody's trying to spend more money, at the
Right.
current time frame.
Yeah. No such thing as free leads, but organic leads are your least expensive.
Right. Yeah. Never,
You know,
nothing's ever free. But yeah, and I think it goes into, you've probably seen it. I know I've heard from other industry people. This is really a time for us as a group of leaders in the sales and marketing area to not worry about why we're looking at something, but look at things. And
Mhm.
that's what I've been telling folks, in my own circles is, hey, now is the time to put anything up on the table, because we're not sure what it's all going to be like, and
Yeah.
what's gonna really hit or click. Prior to all this, I think we all knew in our individual companies, we embrace this or we don't embrace this, or we can or we can't. And we kind of knew our cultural limitations when it came to bringing things to the table. I think what we're seeing now in our industry, hopefully, is everything is on the table. Lots of new things, lots of exploration, hopefully lots of experimentation. And the advantage of that is our message just gets out there more and in more different ways than we
Hmm.
probably ever would have had a chance to do. So if that's a silver lining of this for sales and marketing, that might be one of them.
Yeah, I think it's a great time for just experimentation and innovation, and let's try it, right? So, a couple of things we're working on, just because we're trying to figure it out like everybody else, is, we're just turning that corner. You're obviously ahead in China and you're reopening, and that's just beginning to happen kind of on a state by state level here. And so we're wondering about sending out almost like taking the temperature of the lead base in terms of mindset. So being able to figure out, and, we're trying to figure out what the right channel is, but thinking of sending out a survey. Mike Miller from Primo Solutions has come out with this great kind of survey tool. And I said, maybe we can use that to really mine the database and find out, how are you feeling and how has COVID impacted your either decision making or your time frame or how you're looking at options. And that might start off with a question, if we did a survey, for instance, with to the adult child influencer, and say, where was your loved one during the time of quarantine? And then what were the biggest challenges? And, what kind of kept you up at night? And how did that impact you? And, would you have been less worried if they were in a community than if they were wherever they were quarantined? Does this pandemic that may go on for some time, does this accelerate your decision? Does it not really impact it in any way, or are you going to kind of put the brakes on? I think that would be a super interesting place to start, is to figure out mindset, because I think we're going to find it's all over the board, right? But then you can kind of segment your lead base, and you can say these are the people, because sales teams only can work a certain number of leads effectively at any time. So if you can get to that place of this cohort says, this is going to accelerate my move. These are all the things that went badly for my mom being home or with us or wherever during quarantine. And either I'm not impacted, my decision making isn't impacted positively or negatively, I'm in the same place, or I'm even more motivated, versus people who say I'm definitely going to delay. Then we really know how to nurture and maybe rebuild the trust of the people that are a little more fearful. And that's a different type of campaign, right? It's a lot of trust building protocols. This is what we do. This is how we've come through it, versus different campaigns for people who go, I'm even more motivated. So I was wondering kind of what your thoughts are. We haven't gone forward with it, but we're thinking about, trying it out for, a few of our clients.
hmm I think it's a great idea. I think one of the things that could unfortunately, catch us off guard in our industry is truly what you just described, the changing perception and fears and overall understanding of our client base. I mean, we've had decades of talking to people and all know as sales trainers, when we stand in front of sales groups, we know what we're going to hear as the objections. We know I'm not ready yet. We know the things that go in behind that. We've just introduced a fear level into people that isn't just going to go away. I think there's a hope, neuroscience wise, that our fight or flight is going to just instantly be turned off when there's some sort of green light perception that it's safe. But this is something that's going to stick in the psyche of people, especially seniors who've also been through other big events in the history of their life. We need to learn from that. They didn't just forget World War II. They didn't just forget the Cold War. They didn't just forget, the depression that their parents went through. They're not going to forget this either. So, to think that you can talk to your client and assume that all the discovery you have in the database is still perfectly relevant is probably a very dangerous thing. Do we start from scratch? Do we really start again and just say, hey, I'm just curious and interested. How has this changed you? What do you think is different about you as a person and how you view the world? And just start to really understand that. And I think, to your point, surveying about what is going to be something that is going to highly motivate you not to be caught off guard like this again, or what would make you most afraid. We all feel like being in a community was a way safer place. If you watch the media, the current media message, they make it sound like being in a community was like the worst possible thing that could happen, that you basically put yourself in a petri dish of danger. So there's a lot of difficulty with how do we message against that or in response to it. How do we understand where our people are feeling and what they're thinking? And as we all know, I believe anyway, a survey or a way for them to communicate that doesn't involve a fear of an initial engagement gets a much better, more honest answer. So, using those kinds of tools, I think gives us the opportunity to also get a clearer, more realistic picture versus them talking to me in person and maybe not wanting to hurt my feelings or not wanting to, say the wrong thing, and have me say something back and go judge them, fear of judgment. If you're filling out a piece of paper, not a problem at all. And I would love to be able to do, surveys on a lot of things. To your point there, what do people want to see when they come to a building? Do they want to see a building that looks more normal and doesn't have a lot of immediate visual cues that there's been a pandemic? Or do they want to come in and see, an automated thermoscanner at the front door, making sure that everybody who comes through there is getting a temperature taken? I think you're going to have that polarity of people. So how do we even present our product? All of those things, focus group, survey opportunities, if the companies availing themselves of that now, I think, are the ones that are going to have, a head start on not learning, by accident over time what people really want.
That's a great point. I think we have to take back our own narrative. And I think, it's hard to know how to create the right messaging if we don't understand what's in the minds of our prospects. We could go down the wrong path. And I know a place where Mom just did a survey to say, of course, they have millions and millions of leads in their database. So they probably have better, worldwide data than anybody. And they asked what was the number one biggest barrier to consider senior living today during COVID. And the top answer was that I won't be able to visit my mom. That's that separation, that physical distancing, and keeping the residents isolated was the number one thing. So it's like, how do we change our messaging? We've been talking about, oh, our buildings are beautiful and here's the amenities and the services. And maybe it's just about everyone gets an iPad, you know, every family gets a channel. And we're going to make sure that, you know, you have time, or when things open up, you know, are there, you know, cocktails in the courtyard and every family reserves a certain time outside to, you know, I just think we have to really be super proactive about coming up with those solutions. And a good place to start is to figure out what the barriers are and what the mindset is currently. Because I feel like, you know, it's hard enough. We're kind of selling a product that nobody wants.
Mhm.
They need it, right? But for a large degree, people don't they didn't plan for it. A lot of them don't really want it, and they're scared to death about how to pay for it. And now
Right.
we add a pandemic.
Yeah,
So,
just got easy, right?
great. I'm so glad I'm not on the operator side anymore. Love being a VP of sales and marketing. That was fun, but I'm glad I'm out of it today. So let's talk about sales and sales teams, and how does it change the skill set? How does it change the training? And do we actually need a different kind of salesperson if a lot of the current kind of nurturing that we've historically done is not available to us for a while?
hmm Yeah, I think you make a very good point that we do need to take time and evaluate what we need in that role. What is it really most important for that role to do? I think we do it at a much higher degree for all the other roles in our industry. You know, the executive director, the director of nursing, the director of memory care, you know, a chef. We have some, you know, really deep insights into what that role should be and what kind of person is successful in it. When it comes to salespeople, you know, you find, unfortunately, too often for the operator and the person hired, we just want somebody for the job. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's like I can't have that role open because nobody in the
Right.
company wants to, you know, call people on the phone and ask them to move in and do rejection. So I need a
Yeah.
human being that's willing to take the role. That's for a very long time been kind of the number one requirement. Do you want the job? And, you know, and we've looked at industries, you know, are real estate folks the best for it, or, you know, folks with a more product oriented sales mind the best for it. And I think what I've learned over, you know, 13, 14 years is that relationship builders are the best. So
Yeah.
is tell me how you build relationships. Tell me that you've been part of groups. Tell me that you've, you know, are a person who wants to be around other. Not that an introvert can't be a great, you know, salesperson in our industry, but you need to be somebody who creates cohesiveness with people. We've
Mm-hmm.
had great success, you know, targeting, you know, salon industries, folks that wanted to get out of being behind a chair.
I know.
They spend all day long talking to people about relationships. The key is you have to take away the fear of quote unquote being a salesperson, which we all know comes with a lot of negative baggage in people's minds, you know, what the job is, what it entails. So yeah, I think we need to take a real hard look at what are the skill sets that really make up, you know, success in our industry. And now more than ever, that's going to be the ability to build a sense of safety, a sense of relationship, a sense of trust with a person that we're talking to. And that person has to have just enough of that goal oriented, you know, personality trait that they want to move people through. You don't want to just be, you know, a counselor to our residents or our prospects and endlessly talk to them. You do want to have that, you know, ultimate desire to get the move in, but it's going to be about that part so much. I
Mm-hmm.
think has to really come out even more than we've ever pushed it before. Again, sales, taking an inquiry and getting somebody to say yes, oftentimes can just happen if we're doing the other things well, if we're doing the follow up right, and we're genuine and authentic, and we're making sure that we really care about the people and don't care so much about what the decision is, just that they feel comfortable about the decision they make.
Mm-hmm.
If we can really push some time and effort into that now, it'll be worthwhile. I've suggested multiple times, and I don't know that any companies are doing it. I would love to do, you know, a personality index where we take people who are currently in the seat, successful, not successful, doesn't matter, and do the personality trait inventories and build a couple of models that say, you know, here's what this person looks like. and start to use that a little bit more. If you go to get a higher level sales job, they put you through one of those tests, but we don't do it in the seat. So, that would be a good way to start to get an idea of what the person really looks like. And I think too, we need to be more effective. To your point, training's got to be available, and it's got to be available on demand all the time in multiple ways. That's an area that I always advocate for. And, sometimes you have to really yell loud from the top of the mountain. Our industry just feels like, well, the regional director of sales is out there training people. Well, they are, but they're also doing a lot of other things. So let's look at all the different channels, the live trainings, video training, book handouts, and things along those lines, and really put it on the front burner, to the point that if I'm sitting in a building and I need to solve something from a sales standpoint or from a job role success standpoint, I've got instant resources that I can go and get. And not old trainings that, have just been regurgitated for the last 13 years on the internet, on the intranet portal, but, truly things that are aligned with that operator's specific needs and what they're selling, as well as, what we all start to, I think, believe is the core to sales success in our industry. That's a mountain that we have a lot of climbing left to do on when it comes to sales training and development, and kind of get out of the habit of just trying to find the next person who's successful because they just are.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned PI. I know that when I was at Benchmark, they did PI. And so the first thing they did was kind of have all of us go through it and then sort out, the top performers and folks that were struggling in the role, and then have that inform future hiring. Benchmarks always seems to be ahead of everybody in the industry. So how does it affect the sales process? Kind of last section I want to cover is, we used to think it was an initial, inquiry, however that inquiry came in, discovery. And then from that discovery, we wanted to get face to face, right? So that was really it. And, I'm sure you have listened to thousands of mystery shopping calls, as painfully as I have over the years. It doesn't matter how many times, like, you role play and you have the training and you talk about open-ended questions and you talk about getting to know the life story and understanding motivation and barrier. And yet that mystery shop still comes down to, what's the diagnosis? What meds are you on? What ADLs do you need help with? Can you afford us? And can I get all of that information within 5 minutes so I can put it in the CRM? And now do you want a tour? Which to me is like, it's like going up to somebody at a cocktail party, and you're new to the neighborhood and you get invited to this party, or you see, maybe you are in the neighborhood, I should say, you get invited to a party and you see somebody new who's just moved in, and you go over to them and say, hi, what's your name? What's your address? How many kids do you have? What do you do for work? What are your hobbies? And do you want to come to dinner next Tuesday? It's just as unnatural, right?
Right.
But when you listen to those mystery shops, I mean, that's really what it is. On average, I interviewed Mike Miller. I think his just got published, I think today. The majority of the mystery shops, and he's done over 100,000 of them, the salesperson on average asks for the tour within the first 2 minutes of the conversation.
Yeah. I love Mike. At our last role that I had previous to this one, we were fortunate enough to bring their mystery shopping service in. And as a matter of fact, Meridian uses Mike's mystery shopping.
That's great.
Very, very used to what that product is and what it does. And, I used to have them shop me along with my team. And, my mystery shop went on forever. I was chatting, talking, and doing the whole thing.
Tell me more.
Right. The accusation was always, well, it was a mystery shop, so you're just, doing it. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know any more than you do. I take calls because I'm covering empty buildings, as a sales leader. So I just assume that anybody I talk to is going to be that way. I think the mistake is, and I'm going to share this as a truly personal experience. I have always been a salesperson. My first job out of college, I sold dictation equipment. Talk about the most unsexy thing on the absolute planet. My competitor was, the newly emerging Home Depot, where you could buy an Olympus tape recorder for, $100, and I'm standing in front of a doctor or a lawyer or, insurance adjuster saying, you need to buy this, $700 dictation, micro dictation recorder from me because it's dictaphone. And we had all kinds of things about our brand and all kinds of things about, building relationships and pain points and all of that. And it was a sales job, and I grew and I was successful in it because I followed the processes. Where that stopped working for me was when I got my first job at a building in this industry. I'm sitting there talking to people on the phone, doing exactly what you just described. Tell me what's wrong. So, hi, Janet. It's great to talk to you. I'm Jeff. Thanks for calling. So tell me, what kind of trouble are you having toileting these days? Yeah, it's ridiculous. So is mealtime difficult? You haven't, not only am I reminding this person that they're old and that they're struggling, which is just almost, obscene to think that you're doing it,
Yeah.
but I'm not building a relationship. I'm just looking for things that my features, advantages, and benefits can solve.
Yeah.
And I took absolutely no deposits for, close to 90 days. And I'm sitting in the office thinking, all right, executive director is going to come up at the, our board meeting here and talk about sales. They're going to see two things. One, my name's still not up there. And I'm still just, dialing as many people out of the database, the YGL database, that I possibly can.
Right.
Fortunately for me, one of the senior salespeople came over and just goes, it's interesting. When you were downstairs working in other parts of the building during your training, everybody really liked you. You were getting along with the residents, you're getting along with the staff.
Yeah.
All I ever heard is what a nice guy. And, you don't have any problem with this connective piece, but you're not getting, just connect with people. Just be you.
Right.
Just talk to them.
Yeah.
And I went home that night and I'm like, well, I'm either going to get fired tomorrow or I'm going to start doing this. And truly for me, the aha moment was I stopped being a salesperson. I really just became focused on how many people did I connect with? How many people in the database would be sad if Jeff Gronemyer wasn't there to talk to them, or they didn't feel like they could find me to reach out to? When that became my real goal, suddenly people were like, well, I would get calls on the phone. They'd just say, Jeff, can you tell me a little bit more? Is that one apartment we looked at still available? Because I think, my mom and dad would like to go ahead and make a deposit on it. And I was just like, I didn't even ask you. What are you talking about? What's going on in my mind? This is so not salesy. So maybe for us, it's letting go of maybe stop calling ourselves vice presidents of sales and marketing and start calling ourselves vice presidents of relationship creation, and just leave it at that, and not focus so much. I know the operators will never love to hear this idea that we're somehow not focusing on the end result, but the reality of it is it's a sales role that's anti-sales, and the things that work for the Rain company or Salesforce.com and selling products doesn't work for selling a human being on an emotional decision to walk away from years of life and lifestyle and sense of self, and to your point, go into something that they don't want to go into, that they don't have a positive viewpoint of. There's a lot there. You're in one of my big areas when I talk to salespeople, like, or our industry leaders. Tell me the billboard that you see driving around that says anything positive about your life after 75. It's all get a check for some kind of cancer so you don't die. There's no, hey, are you over 75? Come down and live a little. It's just, here's a medicine to help you not be sick. Here's a colon check you need to get. Hey, how's your heart? Are you going to have a stroke? I mean, all of a sudden, marketing messaging for people over the age of 78 is how to avoid something tragic happening to you. So that's a problem. And then, everything else that goes along with it, obviously, end of life is a dilemma that needs to be solved and isn't easy. And, us talking about things that bring that up and create the dilemma to be even more of an ominous ghost in the corner doesn't make what we are offering sound very good. So you call me on the phone for a hopeful future, and all I did was build the ghost that's chasing you into a more real thing. Counterintuitive in a lot of ways. So I'm with you on that. I think we really need to, just we know we're salespeople somewhere, but really work on the relationship, just however you do it. I've even used the example of dating apps, swiping right and left. I'm like, if you swipe right on somebody and they call you on the phone or send you the next text message, are you asking about their bathroom habits? And no, you're asking about what they like to do, what do they like to eat, what kind of movie do they like, what kind of flowers, what's going to make you interested to them. We need to do the same thing. Maybe that's how we need to change CRMs, swiping right and left, to give it a more relationship oriented aspect.
It's so true. Just, listening to you, I'm thinking about, people who are advertising 55 plus. There's nobody 55 in any 55 plus community.
No.
They're all 75. But they want to that resonates with how they feel, right?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, maybe they're going to be younger people there. And I can tell my friends I'm moving into a 55 plus community, even though the average age is 75. It's like, oh, I'm in the 55 plus. Margaritaville has a 10,000 person waiting list because who doesn't want a cheeseburger in paradise?
Right. Because it sounds like you get to live in a bar. I mean, that can't possibly be too bad. I don't know that I could do it, but I'd certainly rather live in a bar than a nursing home from a perception standpoint.
Yeah, so we really do need to reinvent our messaging for sure. And
well, I think the issue there for us has been care is the motivator that's the easiest to use. And because we've used it and seen success with it, we've accidentally allowed it to have more control over our selling process than we've ever intended to. It's almost like we introduced an invasive species. We thought that talking about care would help us do some things a little faster, and now all of a sudden we've done it and we're trying to eradicate it and we can't, because it means talking about things that are going to technically maybe slow down the process, slow down to speed up is a hard thing to understand for a lot of people. And especially too, from an operator standpoint, I love all of the operators I've ever worked with, but operators aren't they're not salespeople. And I think that's something too that we need to always be aware of is, how do we help our operators feel comfortable about these choices and show the results? Because at the end of the day, we need the buildings to be full, for the residents' benefit, the staff benefit, as well as the overall operation. But yeah, we got to come up with a new way of looking at things. And I think a lot of people are out there doing it. We're pushing towards that with, the different things that are out there. Maybe this pandemic and the need to really look at your business and kind of a clean slate of starting over with prospect need, like we talked about, or prospect perception. Now's the safe time to take those chances. In every difficult situation, there are opportunities, and that's probably one of our biggest ones. It's just a real chance to try some things that we probably otherwise would have never been willing to give, the light of day.
Well, I think it's going to be interesting to see whether the pandemic actually reinforces care as being the only reason that you're going to move in. Because if there's not that kind of motivation, at least that's what we're hearing early on. And maybe it's up to us to pivot that. But the people who are currently moving into our clients' communities are very urgent.
Yes.
And very high need. And so people at this point are not moving out of choice, at least in our markets. They're moving out of crisis. And the crisis is almost always tied to a care need. So as much as we want to get away from that, if we get too far away from it, and that's our only kind of bucket of opportunity, is people that have, care needs that are more urgent, and that becomes the motivation. I think it might take longer to catch up to the remessaging, but I think we have to be building that remessaging for the long run. If we're in this for 12 to 18 months, then in 18 months, we better have that better value proposition. Because if all that we're really going to be, probably the most honest marketing statement that we could make, and people are going to probably hate that I'm saying this, is, we have all these great messages under our brand name. We have our promise and we have our statement, and they're all very, wonderful about life beginning now and all that. But probably the most honest thing that a provider can say is the name of their company or community, and their tagline would be, "We're better than a nursing home."
Right.
I mean, honestly, because you look at the features and amenities, it's almost like a commodity at this point. You know, everyone's got the beautiful building. I could tell you where all the rooms are before I even enter the building, where the admin is, where the common areas are. And so, you know, if we're not really differentiating, then that's the value statement that we end up with is if you can afford not to go to a nursing home, we're a great choice. So we have to decide, are we going to be okay with that? Are we going to stay there, which I hope we don't? Or how are we going to use the next 12 to 18 months to reimagine the experience so that maybe we have to take the urgent crisis driven care motivated leads in this short term, but who are we going to be when we can now take people in out of choice and other motivations? Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. And I think what you bring up there too is another great point, and that's we're not going to come out of this and suddenly find ourselves in a stable next phase. Things are going to change for us for 18, 24, 36 months. So we're going to have to not be complacent to let ourselves think, okay, well, I solved it. Because what we're really solving is what's the next 6 to 8 months look like? And then we're going to solve what the next 6 to 8 months looks like. And then we're going to solve the next 6 to 8 months.
Yeah.
And after 36 months, I think we can look back and go, okay, what have we become and what's there? And I think the mistake some companies will make is they will solve for the next 6 to 8 months and they'll end up trapped in a situation where they do just say, we're all about care. And so would you rather be here or would you rather wait a little longer and end up in the nursing home?
Yeah.
And basically get you to move in because I instill a new level of fear that I can solve. So it's like, well, you didn't realize that this ghost is actually out there chasing you, but I can keep that one from getting you. If you get stuck there, you know, long-term success is going to be difficult for
Yeah.
sure. So I think you make a good point where this is going to continue to be an evolving world for us, something that we're not used to. I mean, we have evolved, you know, over the last decade and a half, 20 years, but it hasn't been, you know, it hasn't been a stock market kind of evolving where we go up and down and back and forth. It's been more, you know, of a slow trajectory. This is going to be rocky. You know, there's going to be waves as we go through, you know, these increments of time. So somebody's got to, smart companies are going to constantly be looking at it and trying to figure out what it means and what's going to be the right message and how it's going to look because, you know, your comment was great. I could lose my eyesight and still go into any building and probably get around without too much difficulty. You know, the only thing that I've ever said is truly different about a building are the people that live and work in it. And, you know, that's your point of differentiation, the people. So, you know, combining all that together, just talking about it here in this, you know, conversation we're having, it's obvious it's a big job to figure this out. Not something to put on the back burner, and hopefully, you know, our industry is working, you know, as a group with thought leadership to really be open to, you know, what is it going to be? Because you know, we can all rise together if we do look at it that way as an industry and not just as individual operators.
That's great. Well, that's a perfect place to wrap it up. Really appreciate your senior living marketing perspective and sharing the insights today. Interesting times, and hopefully we'll see each other in person at a conference as soon as they happen.
I hope so too. And, you know, thank you so much for doing this. I think, you know, this kind of, you know, education and insight and value that you provide through these things really does make an important difference in our industry and helps us see ourselves a little bit more as one and not so much as competitors all the time. So thank you very much for bringing people together and allowing us all to hear, you know, what's going on in the world. And I do look forward to being able to see everybody, yourself and included, once again in a more normal setting and talk about how we've been able to survive this and succeed. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Jeff. Take care.
Take care. Bye. Take care. Bye.